Peak Performance, Section 1, The Growth Equation. 3. Chapter 3, Stress Yourself. Perfect Practice, Fully Present, Single Tasking, Addicted to our smartphones, Out of Sight, Out of Mind, Blocks of Stress, Mindset Matters, Get Your Mind Right, Challenge Response, How the Best View Stress, How the Best View Stress. In the early 1990s, behavioral scientist named K. Andres Erickson, PhD, set out to investigate how people become experts. At the time, prevailing wisdom held that experience was the key. That is, the more time someone spends practicing something, the better they will become at doing the task. Eventually, Erickson reasoned an accumulation of experience, perhaps with a little help from the DNA, culminated in expertise. But no longer after Erickson began his project, an entirely different story emerged. Erickson discovered obscure research showing that physics professors at the University of California, Berkeley, failed to consistently outperform students on introductory problem sets. Yet, some of these professors had been researching and teaching physics for decades. Something didn't add up. As Edison continued digging up little known studies, he continued to find surprising results. The number of years a psychologist had under his belt, for example, had no correlation to how successful he was at treating patients. Other research showed that many physicians actually got worse at making diagnoses from radiography scans as they gained more experience. The more time that passed since their formal training, the more errors they made. In every field that's been studied, from wine tasking to financial investing, when it came to differentiating top performers, experience was not a critical variable. In some cases, it was nearly impossible for Erickson to distinguish between the performance of novices and long-time veterans. Regardless of what angle he examined it from, Erickson found experience and expertise did not necessarily go hand in hand. So Erickson wondered, if no experience, then what is that makes someone an expert? To find out, he and a team of researchers traveled to Berlin, Germany, and embedded themselves among violinists at the illustrious Global Music Academy. The academy had an international reputation for training violinists. Many of the world's best passed through the Global Music Academic Hall of Doors. When Erickson and his teams arrived, they asked the violinists to continue doing exactly what they had been doing, with only one small exception: write it all down. At the end of each day, the violinists recorded how they spent each and every one of their waking minutes. After a 7-day period, Erickson compared the diaries of the top performers, those whom professors of the academic said good enough to have careers as international soloists. To everyone else, nearly everyone practiced the same amount of time each week, roughly 50 hours. This didn't surprise Erickson in this slightly. Simply being invited to the Global Music Academy required immense dedication and hard work. Plus, that all the violinists practiced the same amount of time only confirmed that Erickson already knew. Experience alone doesn't make an expert. Next, the researchers examined what was happening in those 50 hours. How was everyone practicing? The answer was quite differently. The best violinists spend significantly more time intensely focused on mastering a specific goal and remain totally present when doing so. They eliminated all distractions. They rarely, if ever, merely went through the motions. The best violinists were practicing, as Erickson and his team coined it, far more deliberately than everyone else. Erickson and his research team went on to conduct additional studies on athletes, artists, and intellectuals. They found the same thing every time. It is experience that sets top performers apart, but the amount of deliberate practice they put in. Although Erickson wouldn't become associated with the Malcolm Gladwell popularized 10,000-hour rule, the notion that anyone can become an expert at anything by practicing for 10,000 hours, his actual findings represent something quite different. Expertise is not about a certain number of hours practice. Rather, it is about the type of work that fills those hours. Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. It is an experience that sets top performers apart, but the amount of deliberate practice they put in. Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Perfect practice. Perfect practice. So what exactly makes perfect practice? Erickson found that the top performers actively seek out just manageable challenges, setting goals for practice sessions that just barely exceed their current capabilities. But that is only half to the story. What really differentiates deliberate practice is deep concentration. Across the board, when great performers are doing serious work, their bodies and minds are 100% there. They are fully engaged in the moment. To test this, researchers took a group of professional and amateur singers and hooked them up to devices that measure physiological indicators of focus. Once the sensors were in place, the singers went through their usual practice routines. At the end, each singer was asked a handful of questions to assess his level of comfort and focus. A clear pattern emerged. Both their hard physiological data and the self-reported data showed that for the amateur singers, the practice session released tension and was generally enjoyable. The professional singers, on the other hand, demonstrated large increases in concentration throughout the practice session. They focused carefully on improving specific parts of their performance, even if that made the session less enjoyable. The best singers were stretching a bit beyond their comfort zones, and doing so with keen awareness. Though the amateurs and the professionals practiced for the same amount of time, the way in which they used that time was quite different. Across the board, when great performers are doing serious work, their bodies and minds are 100% there. They are fully engaged in the moment, fully present. By doing one thing at a time and devoting his full concentration to that one thing, Dr. Bo is able to do many things well. One of our mentors is a man named Bob Kocher, MD. He is the definition of a Renaissance man. His formal training is in medicine. He went to undergraduate schools at the University of Washington and medical schools at George Washington University. Although he didn't go to a top Ivy like Harvard or Yale, he was awarded the extremely elite Howard Hughes Medical Institute Fellowship, the equivalent of Rhodes Scholarship in medicine. He practiced as a physician at the Harvard affiliate Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, but after a few years, Dr. Bob, as pretty much everyone calls him, realized he could not fully help ailing patients because he was operating in an ailing system. It was a tough and scary decision, but he made the difficult choice to transition out of the clinical practice in search of opportunities to make healthcare better on a systematic level. He found plenty. Since hanging up his white coat, Dr. Bow was worn many hats. Partner at a major consulting firm, healthcare economist reporting directly to the President of the United States, scholar at the Brooklyn Institutions, and professor at Stanford University, to name just a few. Currently, he is a partner at one Silicon Valley largest venture capital firms, where he invests millions of dollars in startup companies with products and services that are potential game changers in healthcare. His opinions on innovation and healthcare are published in the New York Times and prestigious academic journals. Dr. Bow has been interviewed as an expert for countless best-selling books. When national and even international leaders are forced to make decisions about healthcare, they often wait until they've spoken with him. Long story short, Dr. Bob is a top performer if there is ever one. Of course, we admire Dr. Bob for all these achievements and the hard work that they rest upon. But we also look up to him because he wears a $40 digital watch. That is to say, he doesn't do any of this for the money, nor is he driven by material glitz. He prioritizes his physical health, exercising for at least an hour nearly every day. Most important, he is a wonderful husband and a father of two young girls, almost always home in time for dinner and present at extracurricular activities. So when we met with Dr. Bo at his Palo Alto office, what we wanted to learn most is how How does he accomplish so much while seemingly maintaining balance in his life? He answered our question without needing to say a word. From the minute we walked into the room with Dr. Bob, we were in the room with Dr. Bob. We were not in the room with Dr. Bob's email, phone, or any interrupting colleagues. Prior to our time together, he was crafting an article for a high-profile medical journal and making decisions about the future of a company. But he didn't bring those issues into the room with us either. It was just the three of us discussing this book. The energy was palpable. He gave us the same attention he used to the President of the United States. Dr. Bob was fully present. We were witnessing in real time his secret to success. By doing one thing at a time and devoting his full concentration to that one thing, Dr. Bob is able to do many things as well, from writing and influencing healthcare policy, to investing in companies, to being a good husband and a father. His insistence on single tasking ensures that he learns and grows from every document he drafts. And every interaction he is involved in. It is not what I can multitask, he says, but when I do multitask, everything suffers. So I just don't multitask ever. He compartmentalizes his day down to the hour. Each compartment has a concrete objective. These objectives range from, for example, write 500 words for a paper, learn enough about a company to make an investment decision, have a free-flowing conversation with an interesting person, keep his heart rate at 80% of its maximum in a fitness class, influence a decision maker in a highly political meeting, enjoy dinner with his friends and kids. This type of compartmentalization ensures the following. He follows his governing rule. Do only one thing at a time. Dr. Bob's secret, doing so much is doing so little. He's the ultimate single tasker. Single tasking. For 99% of us, effective multitasking is nothing more than effective delusional thinking. For 99% of us, effective multitasking is nothing more than an effective delusional thinking. Dr. Bob's story is insightful, but does his strategy hold true for everyone? And if it does, then why do so many people insist on multitasking? We love multitasking because when we do multiple things at once, we feel more productive and experience greater emotional satisfaction. An internal voice in our subconscious mind says, look at everything I am accomplishing. Look at all of the boxes I am checking off my list. In a society that encourages and rewards optimization and multiple processes, we can't help but want to optimize ourselves. Unfortunately, our brains don't work like computers. For 99% of us, studies show that a little over 1% of the population can effectively multitask. Odds are you aren't in that 1%. That's just how it works. Effective multitasking is nothing more than effective delusional thinking. Even in individuals who claim to be great multitaskers, fMRI scans of the brain reveal it is impossible to do things at once with high level of quality. When we multitask, our brains either constantly switch between tasks or they divide and conquer, allotting only a proportion of our cognitive capacity to a specific task. As a result, as countless studies show, the quality and ironically even the quantity of our work suffers when we are multitasking. Although the switching cost may seem trivial, sometimes just a few tenths of a second per switch, they add up over time as a switch back and forth between tasks. Researchers at the University of Michigan found that seemingly innocuous multitasking can cannibalize as much as 40% of someone's productive time. Although it may feel like we are getting twice as much done when multitasking, we are actually getting close to half as much done. It is not just our short-term performance that suffers at the hands of multitasking. Additional research shows that people who are chronic multitaskers are worse at filtering out irrelevant information, slower at identifying patterns, and have worse long-term memories. In other words, multitasking not only makes the work we do suffer, but it also makes the work we'll do tomorrow suffer. As Edison express violinist and Renaissance man Dr. Bo all demonstrate, engaging in a task with singular focus is how we grow from stress. Unfortunately, simply knowing the perils of multitasking doesn't mean we'll stop doing it. The technologies that enable and facilitate multitasking can be addicting. They take us out of full engagement, decreasing the potential growth stimulus of whatever it is we are doing. Just imagine if a runner doing intervals on the track came to a complete stop to check her phone after each and every notification. The constant start up and stop will certainly impair her performance. But before we can figure out effective ways to escape the pull of these technologies, we must first understand why we have become addicted to them in the first place. Performance practices. Apply the components of perfect practice each time you set out to do meaningful work. Performance practices. Apply the components of perfect practice each time you set out to do meaningful work. Bullet points. Define a purpose and concrete objectives for each working session. Ask yourself, what do I want to learn ask yourself, what do I want to learn or get done? Focus and concentrate deeply, even if doing so is always enjoyable. Single task. The next time you feel like multitasking, remind yourself that research shows it is not effective. Keep in mind Dr. Bob's secret. Do only one thing at a time. Remember that quality trumps quantity. Addicted to our smartphones. Addicted to our smartphones. If we had to bet on it more than in a minute, we'd get wager that you loved your phone. There's nothing wrong with that. We love our phones too. They are incredible gadgets that enable a level of connectivity no one could ever dream of, even 15 years ago. As a matter of fact, if we didn't love our phones, you probably wouldn't be reading this book right now. In early 2014, Brad scrolled down on his Twitter feed from a sidewalk in downtown San Francisco and saw an intriguing tweet from a guy named Steve Magness, who at the time was at the coffee shop in Houston. Brad clicked the link in Steve's tweet and became excited about what he was reading. As he read, Brad was floored, thinking, wow, seems like this guy and I are on the same wavelength about a lot of stuff. Brad read a few more of the Steve's blog spots and decided to shoot Steve a quick email. A few minutes and a few scroll downs later, Steve from his phone 2 time zones away hit reply, and just like that, a fruitful connection was formed. Needless to say, we are not here to demonize technology, but because of stories like ours and some clever, if not manipulated, design on the part of digital apps markets, many of us love our smartphones so much that we simply can't resist them. They are so addictive that each and every day, hundreds of people risk and lose their lives because of them. According to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, more than 9 people are killed and more than 1,150 people are injured daily in automobile crashes that involve a distracted driver. In a recent survey, 31% of U.S. drivers ages 18 to 64 say that at least once in the past 30 days they have engaged in the most dangerous type of distracted driving, that is, texting or tweeting, emailing, Facebooking, etc. Unfortunately, many believe this number is significantly underreported. Have an honest moment with yourself in the past 30 days. Have you checked your phone and or texted from it while driving? If you haven't, have you been a passenger in the car of a driver who has? If you answer no to both questions, that's great, but we're afraid you are in the minority. Although the dangers are well known, most of us simply can't fight the urge to check our phones. To unravel why this is the case, let us turn to another addiction that ruins many lives: gambling. When a gambler awaits the next card at the blackjack table or pulls down the level on a slot machine, they get a hit of the powerful neurochemical dopamine. Dopamine excites and arouses us. Under the influence of dopamine, we feel revved up and alive. Unlike other neurochemicals that are released when we achieve something, the far more potent dopamine is released prior to the payoff or an event, when we are longing for or desiring something deeply. In other words, we don't become addicted to winning. We become addicted to the chase. The unpredictability of gambling, the feeling we get while we wait for the clear dealer to turn over his card or for the slots to cease spinning, triggers a supersized dopamine rush. That's because in certain situations when there is a mere chance of winning are far more irresistible than situations in which we know will win every time. If this weren't the case, the people would get all jazzed up about putting their money into municipal bonds with guaranteed 4% returns instead of into slot machines. But alas, brain reward the brain rewards us with more dopamine for the act of seeking a reward than for the act of receiving one. While being biochemically drawn to the chase is not a survival advantage in modern day casinos. Long ago, it was a necessity. If it wasn't for our attraction to unpredictability rewards, we wouldn't be here today. Our earlier ancestors needed a compelling reason to endure those long hunts for food with no guarantee of success. So we evolved to crave the chase. We evolved to crave the chase. This same tendency explains why thousands of years later we can put down our phones and apps on them designed by highly sophisticated PhDs to lure us and operate like slot machines when we wipe down and wait for our emails and instant messengers on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and on, the refreshed dopamine floods our system. Instead of a row of cherries of sevens, the potential rewards we are chasing are new likes, comments, or messages. Although most of us aren't rewarded every time we check our phone, we are rewarded often enough to keep us checking. And since there is always a chase that someone somewhere is pinging us, we can stop using our social slot machines. Even when we're on the highway, this isn't only a problem when it comes to safe driving. It is also a problem when it comes to performance, because as we discussed earlier, the most effective work, the kind that yields greatness and growth, demands our entire focus. When we met with Dr. Bo, he didn't check his phone once. He didn't even think about it. It wasn't even in the room. Out of sight, out of mind. Out of sight, out of mind. Smartphones distract us whether they are on, off, in our pockets, or on a table, and they command our attention even when they are not our own. The best solution for preventing smartphone distraction is to remove it from the picture altogether. Out of sight, out of mind. The most common defense against smartphone distraction is straightforward. Turn your phone to silent mode and then place it face down on the table, or perhaps even put it in your pocket. Unfortunately, this alone won't enable you to engage in the deep focus necessary for peak performance. Telling someone they can keep their cell phone within arm's reach but cannot check it is not much different than telling a drug addict he can keep a loaded syringe in plain sight but many not use it. In both cases, the cravings for reward and the emotional and chemical addiction to it is overpowering. Resisting the temptation to check our phones is only made harder by the tricks our minds play on us. Have you ever had your phone turned off in your pocket? Only you feel the vibrate. Nevertheless, if so, you're not alone. A recent study from Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne found that 89% of college students suffer from phantom vibration syndrome. About once every 2 weeks, college students reported they felt their phone vibrating when it wasn't, although they knew their phones were off. Their subconscious longing for a notification manifested in a physical sensation. They stopped whatever they were doing to check their buzzing phones that weren't really buzzing. Let's say that you could somehow resist the temptation to check your phone when it is near you. This in and of itself will take a lot of effort, rather than devoting all your cognitive energies to what you are truly trying to accomplish. A good portion of it is instead goes toward thinking about checking your phone. Imagine what might be waiting you on it and restraining yourself from actually checking. From a study published in the Journal of Social Psychology, researchers asked a group of college students to complete a series of difficult motor tasks when their cell phones were visible. Sure enough, their performance was significantly worse than a control group where participants' cell phones were not visible. Sure enough, their performance was significantly worse than a control group where participants' cell phones were not visible. Things got even more interesting when all the participants' cell phone was removed, but the study leader's cell phone remained present. Incredibly, even the phone visible wasn't their own. Study participants' performed suffer. Smartphones distract us, whether they're on, off, in our pockets or on a table, and they command our attention even when they are not around. Though it pains us. Brad and Steve, to say, odds are that just reading about smartphones for the past few minutes may have distracted you from this text. Perhaps this discussion even prompted you to feel for your phone, or worse, check it. Follows that the best solution for preventing smartphone distraction is to remove it from the picture altogether. It turns out there is a lot of truth in the expression out of sight, out of mind. Walter Michael, PhD, is a world-renowned expert on willpower at Columbia University. He's devoted over 30 years to exploring how and why some people are able to resist temptation and others are not. In his years of research across numerous studies involving children and adults, Mitchell has found that one of the best methods for self-control is to move the object of desire out of view. Or in the case of vibrating phones, perhaps out of feel. Michael's findings explain why recovering gamblers are prohibited from being near casinos and why dieters have long been told to keep unhealthy foods, hidden in hard to access places or outside the house altogether. The mere sight of desirable object triggers dopamine, which is like the devil on our shoulder that says, "Are you sure you don't want to have just one?" While writing this chapter, Brad began testing out of sight, out of mind in a number of situations in his own life, whether he was doing hard interval on the elliptical trainer, lifting weights, or writing this book. His performance improved when his smartphone was completely removed from the picture. Real and objective performance measures for each activity, such as watts generated, pounds lifted, and words written, all increased. This subject data reported what he previously experienced. Without his smartphone visible, Brad quickly forgot about its existence. He felt as if he had another 10 to 15% of effort to give to the task at hand. Not having the opinion of turning into his phone and looking at it did far more than lift a small weight out of his pocket. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Performance practices. Identify what interrupts your deep focus. Common intruders, many of which are enabled by smartphones, include text messages, social media, the internet, television. Remove distractors. Remember that only out of sight truly leads to out of mind. Out of sight truly leads out of mind. Out of sight truly leads out of mind. Blocks of stress. Blocks of stress. Stressing yourself is tiring. Great performers understand and expect that there is a limit to how much stress they can tolerate. They are aware that if they exceed these limits, then good productive stress can become harmful and toxic. In his years of studying experts, Erickson found that top performers across all fields are unable to sustain intense work and deep concentration for more than 2 hours. Outside of rate, short-term situations, once this threshold is passed, neither the body nor the mind can sustain the workload. Great performers, Erickson found, generally work in chunks of 60 to 90 minutes separated by short breaks. While Erickson work focused predominantly on creatives, artists, and competitors, chess players, and athletes, new research shows his conclusions also hold through in the workplace. Recently, an international social networking company called the Drogen Group wanted to uncover what habits set apart their most successful workers. What habits set apart their most successful workers. To do most, they partner with the markets of desk time, a time tracking app sophisticated enough to distinguish between when employees are working and when they are not. The Drogen Group found that their all-stars workers adhere to a particular routine. They spend some 52 minutes engrossed in their work before taking a 17-minute break. Alternating between blocks of 50 to 90 minutes of intense work and recovery breaks of 7 to 20 minutes. enables people to sustain the physical, cognitive, and emotional energy required for peak performance. Similar to the Drogian group, other companies have manipulated and analyzed their employees' work without fail, regardless of industry or job description. Chunks of hard work followed by short breaks yielded the best performance. The most productive workers in a meat processing plant working on hourly cycles of 51 minutes on and 9 minutes off. Agricultural workers perform best when they work in 90 minutes cycles of 75 minutes on and 50 minutes off. Other studies examining the habits of workers performing highly demanding cognitive work found cycling between 50 minutes of work and 7 minutes of recovery generated the best output. While the exact work to resist ratio depends on the demands of the job and individual preferences, the overall theme is clear, alternating between blocks of 50 to 90 minutes of intense work and recovery. Breaks of 7 to 20 minutes enables people to sustain the physical, cognitive, and emotional energy required for peak performance. This ebb and flow runs counter to the all too common constant grind of either perpetually working in an in-between zone of moderate hard work or working at the utmost intensity non-stop. Neither of the more traditional approaches is ideal. The former leads to the underperformance. The latter leads to the physical, cognitive, and emotional fatigue, and eventually burnout. One data entry company that was experiencing employee burnout inserted into every hour mandatory breaks of at least 5 minutes, plus 2 additional longer breaks throughout the day, even though they gave away about an hour of paid work. Total output per employee remained unchanged. More important, employee discomfort and eye strain were significantly reduced. By working smart, that is to say, alternating between blocks of hard work followed by short breaks, we get the most out of ourselves and avoid crippling fatigue and burnout. It is interesting to note that in the world of elite running, this is old news. In the 1930s, when German running coach Waldemar Gerchers first developed interval training, or intense repetition of running with short breaks in between, the objective was simple: enable running to accomplish the greatest possible amount of high-quality work before fatigue caused performance to suffer. Nearly a century later, Steve and just about every other running coach still rely upon intervals to increase the amount of quality work their athletes can execute. And although it has taken nearly 100 years, it is nice to see that progressive employers are finally beginning to realize the value of intervals off the track, much like it takes time for a runner to build the fitness necessary to execute high-intensity intervals. It may take time to build yourself out to blocks of undistracted work. This is especially true for people who are accustomed to multitasking or working amid digital device distraction. If you find yourself struggling to maintain full attention, checking your smartphone for a notification, pulling up your email browser mid-wandering, start with small chunks of 10 to 15 minutes and gradually increase the duration every week. No different from any other skill. Deep. Deep work is practice that must be cultivated over time. No different from any other skill. Deep work is a practice that must be cultivated over time. Performance practices. Divide your work into chunks of 50 to 90 minutes. This may vary by task. Start even smaller if you find yourself struggling to maintain attention. As you develop fitness in whatever it is you are doing, you'll likely find that you can work longer and harder. For most activities and most situations, 2 hours should be the uppermost limit for a working block. For most activities and most situations, 2 hours should be the uppermost limit for a working block. Mindset matters. Imagine you just finished a hard physical outdoor workout on a scorching summer day. Someone presents you with an ice cold milkshake. Hot and hungry as you might be, before including, you might ask, what is the shake? Is it healthy, low calorie, blend organic fruits and vegetables with almond milk and whey protein? Or is it the nutritional opposite, a calorie bomb or a full-fat chocolate ice cream, whole milk and sugary syrup? Science and common sense tells us that our bodies will react differently to each of these drinks. The calorie bomb will, at first, makes us feel more satiated. A few hours later, however, thanks to all the sugar, we crave more sweets. The healthy version, on the other hand, will refresh and energize us, leaving us feeling lighter on our feet, but it may also leave us a bit less satisfied than if we'd gone for the other options. Perhaps we'd find ourselves snacking sooner. When researchers from Yale compared how people responded to the two shakes you just described, they confirmed all of this assumption. Study participants who received the unhealthy shake reported feeling greater immediate satisfaction, but craved more sweets later. They also experienced a steeper decline in ghrelin. Ghrelin is the hormone associated with hunger, and its decline told the brains that I'm full. None of this should sound surprising because it is not. It is precisely what you expect to happen. With one small exception, the contents of the milkshakes given to each group were exactly the same. The only thing that differed was the description. It was the participants' minds, not the sugar, fat, fruits, vegetables, or protein, that controlled not only how they subjectively felt after drinking the shakes, but also their deep hormonal response. It is easy to dismiss the impact of mindsets as a pop psychologist's concept aimed at making us feel better about ourselves. But the hard science tells a different story. The lens through which we view the world affects everything from learning to health to longevity to our hormonal response to different milkshakes. Get your mind right. In the late 1960s, at Yale's University, a young PhD candidate named Carol Dweck was studying helplessness in children. In particular, she wanted to answer the question, why do some children give up when faced with failure, while others are motivated by it? The answer she found was all in their heads. The children who gave up easily also avoided challenges and felt threatened by others who were different from themselves. They often perceived learning and growth as outside of their control. In their minds, the qualities that determine whether they will succeed or fail were fixed. In adult speak, these children believed it was their innate ability and talent, their genetic code, that governed the outcome of nearly all situations in life. To them, they either had it or they didn't. They were either smart or stupid. The children who were motivated by and more apt to confront challenges, on the other hand, had a completely different mindset. They felt that with hard work they could do anything. They didn't see ability as something that was fixed, but rather as something that could be improved with practice over time. The children had what Dweck called a growth mindset. The way we think about the world has a profound effect on what we do in it. The way we think about the world has a profound effect on what we do in it. When Dweck and her colleagues tracked the performance of a group of 7th grade students for 2 years, they found that although all the students started from the same measurable baseline, those with growth mindsets progressed significantly faster than their fixed mindset peers. The growth mindset students were willing to push themselves harder, sought out to manageable challenges, and viewed productive failure as positive. In contrast, the fixed mindset students avoided challenges and quit when the going got tough. It may seem that the mindset we develop is largely out of control, resulting from the values instilled by our parents, caregivers, and perhaps very first teachers we encountered at a young age. We were rewarded for hard work and effort, growing mindset promoting. Or were we rewarded only for outcomes, fixed mindset promoting? Furthermore, by the very nature of a fixed mindset, are those who have fixed mindsets inherently stuck with them? Are those who have fixed mindsets inherently stuck with them? Or is there a way to change people's minds? To find out, Dweck put 7th grade students with fixed mindsets through an 8-week course that focused on neuroplasticity, or the science of how the brain can grow. The curriculum included convincing studies and captivating stories that work together to show students how flexible their minds really are. It worked. At the end of the course, the vast majority of the students who had previously felt that their abilities were fixed shifted their outlooks. More important, the rate of progression in school increased. Remarkably, as they shifted their mindset, they also shifted their academic trajectory, going from near failure to academic success. Dweck's work proved that The way we think about the work has a profound effect on what we do in it. If we cultivate growth mindset and believe that skills come from struggle, then we are more likely to expose ourselves to the good kind of growth promoting stress. But the power of mindset doesn't stop there. It turns out that our mindset towards stress not only determines if we'll expose ourselves to it, but also how we'll respond. Challenge response. How we view stress weighs heavily on how stress influences us. When you hear the word stress, what comes to your mind? Maybe you thought about growth. If you didn't, don't feel bad, even though the first section of this book has highlighted the positive attributes of stress. It still might be hard for you to overcome years of being told that stress is toxic. Culture has conditioned us to minimize stress and avoid it at all costs. For the unfortunate times when we can avoid stress, we are given coping techniques or strategies to get through it, so that we can minimize the damage. Even we, Brad and Steve, in the middle of writing a chapter extolling the virtues of stress, experience a negative knee-jerk reaction to the world. This is an unfortunate, costly bias that is difficult to overcome. Colin McNoniel, PhD, is a health psychologist at Stanford University. For many years, like every other health psychologist, he worked tirelessly to help people avoid stress. Her outlook was this: stress is bad, and her job was to figure out how people could minimize its negative impact. But then she came across research that blew her mind. A 2000 study found that the small portion of Americans who view stress as facilitative have a 43% lower chance of premature death than those who view stress as destructive. The obvious explanation, of course, is that people with a positive outlook towards stress develop that mindset because they didn't experience stress very often. That is, if you're never feeling stress, when of course you will think that stress isn't so bad. When the researchers compared the total number of stressful events that each group experienced, they were shocked to discover that the number was virtually the same. Researchers controlled for just about every variable besides mindset and still saw significant mortality differences. Could something as simple as one's attitude about stress truly contribute to extend life? This question captivated McGonigal. Might she possibly have had it wrong for all these years? Her quest was to find the answer turning to the upside of stress, a book that challenged the prevailing wisdom on stress. She discovered a large body of evidence showing that how we view stress weighs heavily on how stress influences us. Some individuals learn to assess stressors as challengers rather than threats. This outlook, which researchers call a challenge response, is characterized by viewing stress as something productive and much like we've written, a stimulus for growth. In the midst of stress, those who demonstrate a challenge response proactively focus on what they can control. With this outlook, negative emotions like fear and anxiety decrease. This response better enables these individuals to manage and even thrive under stress. But that's not all. Just like our mindset about milkshakes changes our deeper biological profile, so, too, does our mindset about stress. Of the many hormones at play when we are stressed, two are particularly important: cortisol and hydroepiandrosterone, DHEA. DHEA. While neither is categorically good or bad, and both are necessary, chronically elevated cortisol levels are associated with lingering inflammation, impairing immune functions, and depression. By contrast, DHEA has been linked to a reduced risk of anxiety, depression, heart disease, neurodegeneration, and a range of other diseases and conditions. DHEA is also a neurosteroid, which helps the brain grow. When under stress, you want to release more DHEA than cortisol. This ratio is aptly named the growth index of stress. Sure enough, studies show that people who react to stress with a challenge response have a higher growth index of stress versus those who perceive stress as a threat. In other words, if you frame stressors as challenges, you'll release more DHEA than cortisol. As a result, your growth index of stress will be higher and you'll actually experience health benefits instead of health detriments. And according to the 2010 study on stress and mortality that we mentioned earlier, you might just live longer. you must just live longer too. It is becoming clear that cultivating a growth mindset and a challenge response to stress is highly beneficial. These mindsets increase our health and longevity, and as we're about to learn, they also enhance our performance. How to best view stress? By pushing us toward just manageable challenges and enhancing how we respond to them, the right mindset opens up the possibility for growth to occur. At the start of an Olympic event, most of the athletes share a look of stoic, steely-eyed determination. Few, if any, Olympians appear to be anxious. Contrast this with your local 5K race, where weekend warriors trying to run at an 8 minute per mile pace are nervous and stressed out, all while racing for a finisher medal they'll be given regardless of their performance. What's going on here? Are the elites simply immune? Are the elites simply immune to stress? Or of course not. They just know how to channel it effectively. In a study including more than 200 light and non-elite swimmers, researchers used a psychological survey, the competitive state anxiety inventory, to measure stress before a major race and then ask each athlete if they view stress as beneficial or harmful. They found that prior to the race, both the elite and non-elite swimmers experienced the same intensity of cognitive and physical stress. They all felt the nerves, anxiousness, and perhaps even a bit of fear that accompanies standing at the edge of a pool, awaiting the starter's gun and the impending whirl of hurt that follows it. The difference was that the non-lines viewed stress as something to avoid, ignore, and try to quiet. They felt stress would hurt the performance. The elites, on the other hand, interpret the stress and the sensations that came with it as an aid to their performance. It prepared them to get the most out of their bodies. In other words, the elites exhibited a challenge response to stress, and as a result, it didn't bother them nearly as much, if anything. It helped them challenge their hidden psychological arousal into explosiveness in the pool. Additional research published in the Journal of Experiment Psychology shows that instead of trying to calm yourself down, rephrasing performance anxiety as excitement is often advantageous. When you try to suppress pre-event nerves, you are inherently telling yourself that something is wrong. Not only does this make the situation worse, but it takes emotional and physical energy to fight off the feeling of anxiety. Energy that could be better spent on the task at hand. Fortunately, according to the authors of this paper, simply telling yourself, I am excited, shifts your demeanor from what they call a threat mindset, stressed out and apprehensive, to an opportunity mindset, revved up and ready to go. Compared to those who attempt to calm down, the authors conclude individuals who reappraise their anxious arousal as excitement perform better. Put differently, the sensations you feel prior to a big event are neutral. If you view them in a positive light, they are more likely to have a positive impact on your performance. These studies confirm what every great performer we interview for this book tells us. They all admit to feeling stress, especially prior to big performances. But they also say that rather than try to push the stress away, they welcome and channel it toward the task at hand. In the other words of the world champion whitewater kayaker Dane Jackson, fear, perhaps the most potent form of stress, is there for me in every aspect of kayaking, whether I'm preparing for a run on the biggest waterfall or before my final ride at the World Championships. I don't hide from it or try to ignore it. I feel the sensation and channel it to help me focus, to nail the line, or to put up the biggest ride I can. Mindset research doesn't suggest that innate ability doesn't matter, but it does suggest that how we nurture our nature matters too. By pushing us toward just manageable challenges and enhancing how we respond to them, the mindset opens up the possibility for growth to occur. In the last two chapters, we focus on the first half of the growth equation, stress. We explore how stress, when it is at the right dose, serves as a powerful stimulus for growth, how skills come from stable and productive failure, and the value of actively seeking out just manageable challenges. We also learn how to stress ourselves in blocks that last under 2 hours, with it focus, deliberate practice, and with our digital devices out of the picture. Finally, we saw how our mindset affects not only how we perceive stress, but also how we respond to it. Although allowing ourselves to be stressed and doing so with a growth mindset can feel hard, it turns out that might actually be the easy part. In a paradoxical twist, the second half of the growth equation, rest, can be even harder. Ernest Hemingway said that as difficult as his blocks of writing were, it was the way until the next day, when he forced himself to rest, that was hardest to get through. Or in the words of another great author, Stephen King, for me, not working is the real work. Next, we'll turn to the second half of the growth equation, the work of the non-working rest. Performance practices. Remember the power of mindset. How you view something fundamentally changes how your body responds to it. In situations where you feel the sensation of stress, remind yourself this is your body's natural way of preparing for a challenge. Take a deep breath and channel the heightened arousal and sharpen perception toward the task at hand. Challenge yourself to view stress productively and even to welcome it. You'll not only perform better, you'll also improve your health. Thank you.